Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grimm Times podcast. This is the first part of our 5-part religion series. I'm joined today by Skylar Sylvie.
Hello.
And we are going to discuss, overall for this whole series of podcasts, we're going to try and cover one section of the Bible at a time. And I want to make it clear just to start out that we're not trying to bash anyone who is religious or believes in God or believes in every single word of the Bible. We're just trying to get people to think about it a little bit more rather than just having blind faith. I mean, faith is good. I can understand that. But
what about hypocrites?
Well, yeah, that too. I mean, it's really a problem, and you got to think about it. I mean, I guess somebody could live and die by the sword, by the Bible, and believe every single word, and it would be fine for them. But if you really want to know the truth and you want to get down to the facts and what really happened, rather than just fairy tales, I think it's good to really study this. I'm not saying the whole Bible's a fairy tale either. I mean, this is such a sensitive subject that anything you say can be taken, horribly wrong and against you. But anyway,
this can't. I think the whole Bible's a load of freaking bullshit.
Well, I mean, and that's something that I want to get into as well, is to really find out which parts are no good and which parts could be used or could be legitimate, could be true. I mean, we don't know who authored the entire Bible. We only know parts of it. Like the book of Matthew, people think it's written by Matthew, but it was not. People think the book of Moses was written by Moses, but it was not. It was just Moses was the main character, and that's why they called it.
People think the Bible was written by God himself, so...
Yeah, well, anyway...
Indirectly.
Yeah, right. So, I think today I want to start out, my first area of study was really into Egypt and things like that. I kind of just stumbled upon it accidentally, really, but I want to cover a few different things with the pyramids and Moses himself and different things along with that. Skylar, you might know something about this. There was one rumor that when Moses went to the top of Mount Sinai and they had that huge light and everything that went on there, people would say that was a UFO, or they thought it could be.
Back then?
No, but I mean that's the way it's interpreted now. Is some people think that it was a UFO. And that would directly affect the course of humanity if that story is true.
Yeah. There's an interesting part of the Bible somewhere where, there's the flying chariot on fire, and there was even one thing I read where it had this rock that shot. It was a vertical rock, and it had a bright light come out of the bottom of it, and the two characters fell on their faces, and smoke poured out of the bottom of it as it flew into the heavens.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little odd. That sounds really familiar to present-day technology.
So, to be fair, that was a paraphrase, but...
So you've got the whole story of Moses and how he was found in a river, and the name Moses is derived from the meaning of sun. It means sun. Some people try and say that Moses means to draw in, and they would name him that because they drew him in from the water, to take him in to live with the Pharaoh. But really, in the way that Moses is named Moses, it would have meant that Moses drew something in. So it really doesn't make sense. Moses means son, and that's kind of the way that it should be interpreted. But something kind of interesting is that Moses actually, he wasn't only married one time. And people think of Moses, you think of the holiest man in the Bible, or one of them. But he was actually married a couple times, and one of them, the last one, he got married to a black woman. And his sister and even his brother didn't necessarily approve of this. So that's kind of interesting to note. And it's not that Moses wasn't even against slavery. He wasn't against the institution of slavery. Supposedly he was against the slavery of the Jewish people or the Israelites. And he thought that they should own slaves as well. The Israelites should own slaves. So that's another kind of interesting thing. And that's another big deal. I mean, people try to say that slavery is bad because of some sort of morals, when really God wasn't necessarily opposed to slavery.
Actually, no. In fact, there's actually parts in the Bible, the beginning actually, or the beginning, but close to the beginning, actually before that. Can't remember the name of the book. But the point is...
Was it Exodus?
No, it wasn't Exodus. Anyway, the overall point is he condones whenever you invade, let's say you invade a city.
Yeah.
You are to kill off all the men and all the adult women, and to take the unwed women, which would have been like freaking preteens and teenagers, take those women and the gold and their riches and take them as your plunder. Well, when you take women like that and they're kind of your sex slaves, I mean, what's the difference between that and just some dude moving bricks?
Aside from the questionable activities of what God supposedly told them according to the Bible, I want to get into the fact that there was no proof of slavery even existing in Egypt whatsoever.
Oh, just for clarification, sorry I interrupted, but Deuteronomy was the name of the book.
Oh, okay. All right. Um,
Sorry, but yeah.
no, yeah, no problem. You had 600,000 males who supposedly resided in Egypt as slaves. And that's not counting their families. If you count the families of the 600,000 men, then you're looking at about 2 million people, it was estimated. And these 2 million people
Bullshit.
these 2 million people are the ones who Moses supposedly led out of Egypt through the Red Sea, parting the Red Sea, which isn't necessarily to say that's an ocean either. It's actually speculated now that the Red Sea was a swamp or a swampy area that he led them through. But back to the point, if you have 2 million Jewish people or Israelites going through Egypt, you would think that somebody would have noticed, or there would be some sort of evidence left behind. The archaeologists really favor pottery, and there was not one shred of pottery with Hebrew on it in Egypt. Egypt was looked upon as they were a peaceful people. They were not a warlike people, and it was looked at as, one of the places to be in the world. And they really just focused on culture and building up their own society rather than war type things. And eventually that did lead to their downfall, I would assume, because they're not around really today.
They were conquered by the Romans.
Yeah, yeah. So, and so the thing is, the pyramids were not built by slaves. A lot of people like to think that they were built by slaves, but this isn't necessarily true because, for one, you could not. The way they say the pyramids were built could not be done. There were two groups who have recently tried to recreate the building of the pyramids. One was a Japanese group that got together, and they tried to make a 30-foot pyramid. Just 30 feet, not even close to the size of the real pyramids. And they tried doing it with the same technology that the Egyptians had back then, and they couldn't do it. They got about 4 feet high, and they had to give up. And the same thing happened with, I think it was a university in the United States. I don't know if it was in Ohio. It might have been Ohio. But they tried doing the same thing with the 30-foot pyramid. Couldn't do it. They didn't even get halfway. They got a little bit further than the Japanese, but they couldn't even get halfway to building this pyramid with that sort of technology. And so it really shows you how precise these people must have been. UFOs aside and alien interference aside, I mean, it's an insane feat that they accomplished, and mere slaves could not have done this. And something else, the actual people who built the pyramids are most likely poor people from the north and south of where the pyramids were built. They were brought in, and the ones who did give their lives building these pyramids, they've just recently discovered these graves. I think it was a tourist on horse or camelback or something, actually, who just kind of discovered these, stumbled upon these. They were buried 9 feet down, and they were buried very well. They were buried with bread and beer, and this was, to help them in the afterlife, so they would have something to.
Well, I gotta throw a couple things in here.
Yeah.
One is that a lot of people believe, as you said, that the Jewish slaves built the pyramids. Well, to suggest there was no Jewish slaves would suggest that the Egyptians may not have built the pyramids at all. I don't think there would have been enough Egyptians to justify it, and the reason why is actually because each stone weighed around 100 tons.
Yeah, with some of the biggest being 400 tons.
Yeah, now the point with that is, let's say we take this into a weightlifting scenario. Let's say you're benching weights, What we know from that is if you lift up one side, let's say it's like this 500-pound, weighted bar. You pick up one side of the bar, it's not going to weigh really anything. And the same thing if you pick up the other side. Like, all the force and the gravity is going to the opposite end of what you're lifting. But if you lift it from both sides, or even of the bar, if two people lifted both sides, it would become nearly impossible to lift it if you weren't strong enough, because all the center of gravity would go to the center. If you look at the radius of each stone, let's say one being 100 tons, do you really think you could have enough people to pick it up manually by hand to fit the entire circumference of that stone to justify putting just one stone on the peak of a pyramid?
Yeah, exactly.
It would just doesn't make any sense. You need a lot of people. I mean, it takes like roughly 5 to 10 people just to push a freaking small car over.
Yeah.
And so it's one of these things where look at it that way, and then just look how far the nearest rock quarry was, which is like roughly like I think like 5 miles or some crazy crap. And let's give them more credit. Let's say they had giant wooden cranes.
Okay.
Well, you couldn't lift that with a wooden crane. They would probably have had like papyrus rope,
Yeah.
and then you got all that sand. I mean, I don't know. I just have trouble buying it, And
Yeah.
what they actually say they did is just the theory seems nonsensical. I don't believe they built it. I personally believe it was built before they even got there.
Yeah, and to your point, there's no way that they're going to take a 400-ton block up a mile-long ramp that's made of sand. It just isn't possible.
Yeah, that would be one steep ramp.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, one thing I will say, on top of it, here's a good question that very few have ever asked. Why aren't the pyramids more hollow?
Yeah.
Like, why are there only little tiny sections, where they buried people? Like, if I was going to build a house, am I just going to build this, like, giant 4-story sized house, but then have this little room the size of half of a freaking mobile home?
Yeah, and some of those tunnels inside the pyramid, they're not even tall enough for a person to walk through. They have to send little robots in there. And one of the expeditions back in '95, they had come across a turn in the pyramid, a corner, and it was so small the robot could not even make the corner. They had to pull the robot out and then come back like a year later with an altered robot that would actually make the corner. So why would they build something that small? Why would that corridor be there? And I know that they line up with certain constellations in the sky, and we know now that the 3 Great Pyramids are meant to symbolize the 3 stars in the constellation of Orion, or the Orion's Belt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are all sorts of hidden meanings. I mean, and these tunnels, well, I call them tunnels, but I mean, these things that go through the pyramids that are so tiny, they point to different constellations, but then again, they're not a telescope type design. It's not straight through just pointing at one thing. They go in, they curve around, they go through ups and downs and all kinds of stuff. And when they finally come out, they meet up with this constellation. What do the curves mean? Why are they, all over the place like that? But
and then why did they stop building the pyramids?
Yeah, and how did
they started going in caves?
So I mean, I don't know. And one other thing quickly about the pyramids, we do know now that they used to look like glass from a distance. They were covered in polished limestone, and that would glow in the sun, and it almost made them look like they were made of glass.
That stuff, that highly polished stuff, was used to build Cairo.
Oh, wow, okay.
It was ripped off. Those caps that covered the pyramids, they were caps, and they were just removed.
Oh, so it's kind of looted.
Yeah. But even then, I mean, I don't know, like, even without the caps, I mean, look how long these things have lasted.
Yep.
So, I mean, and that the stone isn't actually like sandstone or anything. It's much harder. So, I mean, there's actually things they have there with cuts in it, like precise, machinery cuts.
And not only that, I mean, how did they make those? They didn't really have the tools to do something like that. I mean, unless they...
Or did they?
Yeah, that's the thing. And that leads me to my next point, actually, about Moses. So, just based on my own ignorance, actually, I only thought that Moses went up to the top of Mount Sinai one time. But I do remember the golden calf story. So basically what happens is Moses goes up the mountain, and I can't remember, was it like 40 days and 40 nights or something that he's on top of the mountain?
Yeah.
And then he comes back down, and he finds the townspeople worshiping a golden calf. And so he gets angry and he smashes the tablets. He breaks them. So he goes back up the mountain and he spends another 40 days and 40 nights. And that part I did not know. And this time when he comes down, they said that in the Bible, I think it says his face was glowing so brightly that people couldn't look at him or didn't want to look at him. And what what we've really come to think, based on this information, is that maybe whatever he used to carve into the stone to make the Ten Commandments on, maybe that was some sort of tool, and he got like a burn from it, like a chemical burn or something else, and that's why he was able to make such precise markings into this, really hard stone, hard rock, and he came back down. And he actually kept those burns, or kept that glowing description for the rest of his days. It never
But
went
then,
away. He had to wear a shroud over his face.
but then, what doesn't make any sense is I've all of the little things I've watched on Moses. It was God that did it. It wasn't Moses that etched the words.
Huh. So I wonder why Moses would have that glowing feature
The
afterward.
burning bush.
Yeah. Oh, so you think the burning bush affected his face?
No, I don't know. Like in the story, I get supposedly like, God talked to him through a burning bush,
Yeah.
and that's how whatever. And it doesn't. It just sounds like to me he was like tripping on shrooms or something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just I don't know. Like and like I don't get if that's God's word and he believed in it so much. Why did he break the freaking his word?
Yeah, why would he
And
break those tablets, especially if they were handed by God? I wouldn't do anything. I would put those in a glass case and lock them up.
and then somehow or another they ended up in the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah. And something else about that bush, actually, supposedly they've still got that bush preserved over there. They built a building around it. I can't remember where it's at, but it was not far from where Moses grew up. So supposedly that
Yeah.
bush still exists.
So it's as easy as, oh look, there's this bush over here. Let's burn the bush and cool it real quick and make it look like it did something. Because lightning hitting a bush at random in the desert or whatever is so unknown. Never happens.
Wouldn't that be sad if like lightning did strike the bush and Moses was like drunk or something and he walked out there and it's like, oh my gosh, this bush is talking to me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And supposedly, why, what I never understood, and in that whole part of the Bible, the Old Testament, God is so jealous
Yeah,
of idols and anything, that doesn't resemble him. And it's just like, that seems like a human characteristic.
yeah. And I mean, I know we were made in his image, but that was something else I was going to ask people. I was going to try and trick them and ask, is jealousy a sin? And if they said yes, then that would mean that God
Actually,
had.
it's one of the seven deadly sins.
And who made the seven deadly sins, though? Was that a man-made thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some guy had a dream, or seven levels of hell, or something like that. Actually, I'm thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
But I know it was some. I don't remember that ever being in the Bible of the seven deadly sins, and the whole God in His image. Like, do you realize that there's an entire verse right before that everybody ignores, and it says God made man, or we are to make man in our image and in our likeness,
Yeah.
like ourselves. So he talks in plural.
Yeah, that's something I've wondered about a lot. I don't know what that means. Maybe he's referring to, God and the Spirit or something, and the Holy
Oh, yeah,
Ghost.
whatever. Yeah, then there's the Holy Trinity, which I'm a huge, huge anti-fan about. Like, I always was. It never made any sense. If God is Jesus and Jesus is God, then Jesus, whenever he went and preached to people, was actually, whenever he mentioned God, he was just talking about himself, making him a massive narcissist. Then he gets killed, comes back to life, but it's supposed to be God, so we're all like worshiping a zombie.
Yeah, that is kind of odd because it's like Jesus would pray too. So he talks to God too. So is he like talking to himself, or is he talking to like maybe Jesus is like a fragment of God, or something like that. I don't know. It's really hard to understand. I mean, maybe being humans, we just can't comprehend it or something. I don't know. Because I mean, when I try to think about space and how massive everything is, I mean, I almost can't even comprehend that.
but why wouldn't it be mentioned? If that was what we were supposed to know, then why isn't it specifically stated? Why does it need our interpretation?
And that's something
So,
else. We don't even get to decide what we need to know. The Catholic Church decided what we need to know hundreds of years ago, or a couple hundred years ago, actually, when they took it down to the 66 book Bible that we currently have. We don't even get to decide what we know. They decided for us.
and actually, here's the proverb or whatever I was talking about, which is Genesis 1:26. And it says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image." And this is the New International Version. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, the sharks that can kill us, and the birds in the sky, like the vultures that will eat us after we're dead. Over the livestock and the wild animals, the lions and tigers and bears that can easily maul us, and over all creatures that move along the ground, like the bacteria that could insta-kill us from slow death and infection.
Yeah.
So, whatever. So, I mean, that's that part, and people skip out the entire "let us make mankind in our image." They cut that part out, and then they say the rest of it. It's what I love about people interpreting the Bible is they cut out all the context and only talk about what they want to say or read.
Yeah. Yeah.
And him, I'm not dogging anything other than personally. I'm dogging the Bible and the people who hypocritically and purposely interpret the Bible incorrectly and spread misinformation about it as a means to try and convert people or
Yeah.
justify their own beliefs.
Yeah, and that happens so often in different churches. I mean, they sensationalize everything. And also, going back to the jealousy thing, I just want to mention it's kind of odd. I mean, I still don't really understand that, but I can think of over at least 20 places, 20 places in the Bible where it says God is a jealous God, and he's jealous and proud of it. It's not like, it's just one of those things that happens. And he gets angry really easy when it comes to jealousy.
Like actually earlier today, there was this post on Facebook, and I got in an argument with, and some person, of which I'll be nice and not say their name, was discussing suicide, saying the only thing we had control of in our life, and it was considered a sin because it's beating God in his own game, right?
Mm.
And I wrote a thing on there saying, if what this says is, if this is true, then that would make God egotistical, self-centered, and flawed. If he was flawed, then he is not perfect, and if God is not perfect, then he is in fact not God,
Or
at
not,
least by his own definition.
yeah, not omnipotent or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, and then I get like bombarded by this woman, like telling me to shut the hell up and stuff, and then starts talking about karma, and I'm like, you're mixing Hinduism with Christianity, and that within itself is a sin as well.
Yeah, blasphemer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After I'm being called a blasphemer, and then she goes on my Facebook after I say the thing I read earlier, and calls me a hypocrite. Oh, Christian, you're a hypocrite. And I'm like, I never said I was Christian. I just sat there and dogged God. And you're saying that I'm Christian and that I was being a hypocrite? No, I'm not. I'm not Christian at all. Hence why I'm able to say what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
if you were a Christian, you wouldn't be judging me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the problems is so many people don't practice what they preach, and they want something to defend, whether or not they believe it in their heart deep down that it's true or not. And
What's funny is when you judge them and they say, only God can judge. It's like what you just said was judgmental.
yeah, yeah. And I've had people try to tell me that I'm not saved because I wasn't saved in their church. It's like you could be saved when you're young, and then people try to question you regardless. And I mean, I'm thinking of a particular church in mind that I went to one time in Humansville, or with Humansville people. But it wasn't my church. It wasn't the First Baptist Church, but it's pretty ridiculous. they are so hypocritical and they don't want to listen to reason sometimes. And you got to look at fact too. You can't just, I mean, I don't even know where to go with that. But I mean, we're running out of time here. It really is just disappointing for me. I mean, to grow up, hearing all these stories and all these fantastical things, and then to actually do the research and figure out what's really going on. And you find some of it is true, and then some of it is just it's not true at all. The story of the slaves in Egypt was it started with a guy. It was a Greek historian named, I think it was Herodotus. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he had started that whole rumor about the slaves in Egypt, and it turns out it's not true at all, and that pretty much nullifies the entire story of Moses, let alone the massacre of the firstborns of the Pharaoh and all that just twisted stuff, and like murdering baby sheep or goats, or I think it was sheep, and then smearing the blood on your door. I mean, really, is that the work of a benevolent God? That seems pretty messed up to me. I mean, it was kind of funny. They did an episode of South Park on that where Cartman has a dream, and Kyle is, one of the people in where was that, in Cairo or Cairo?
Yeah.
Wherever the pharaoh was, and they were like cracking the necks of a baby sheep and like smearing the blood from its neck all over their door, and Cartman's like, no.
Well, I haven't watched the episode. I don't know if Cairo was like the Egyptian capital or not. I mean, I've never been all that interested in the Egyptian stuff, too much. But I want to say something else, though. A side note with the pyramids, you said the caps look like glass, and stuff like that. You pointed that out. But then what a lot of people don't know about is the glass-like pyramids found under the ocean in the Bermuda Triangle,
Oh,
which I
okay.
thought was quite interesting.
I would love to go into that. We'll have to do that later on. There's a lot. I mean, we could go into the South American pyramids as well. And it's so odd that those pyramids are in South America, and then the ones you just talked about, and in Egypt, and they're in these concentrated places. It's not like the pyramid was a common building design back then. I mean, if it were common, then they would have been everywhere, not just in these concentrated places. So, I mean, what inspired those? That's a whole nother issue. But yeah, I mean, what I was saying before, it's just disappointing. I mean, you want to believe all this stuff, and you want everything to be warm and fuzzy, and there be this safety net, and when you die that everything's taken care of. And I do believe that when you die, you do move on, and consciousness does still exist, and there is a God. I mean, that's just me personally. I mean, Skylar, you probably have a different opinion on that, but I want the truth, and that's the whole reason that we're doing this thing. And Skylar, I appreciate your opinion so much in all this, because I mean, you need to look at it from all angles. You can't just be so narrow-minded to trust everything that people tell you in the Bible or in church or wherever, because they're biased. And I mean, not saying that we're not biased, but we're trying not to be.
Yeah.
So
It's just, I want to say this, though, and I know there's a lot of people out there who will sit there, and there's a lot of Christians who will say, well, none of this discussion matters because it has nothing to do with Jesus or Christ, and thus this has nothing to do with Christ, then, it's not Christianity, and it's all pointless in some way. And in my mind, I look at that and say, well, irrelevant as to whether or not that is the case, the Old Testament really does, in my opinion, is paint the picture of who this God is supposed to be like, his personality and everything. To believe that when his son was born, if it was his son, and then just he suddenly changed his mind out of nowhere, not only does it sound like it makes no sense whatsoever, but on a side note, it just sounds like he's an imperfect God because he changed his mind, and change his mind must imply that feels like he made a mistake, and he doesn't make mistakes. He's God, so
yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
he changes his mind so many times in the Bible, and he does different things. And one of the other things that was interesting to me, really quick here, about when they had the Garden of Eden, and God came down and he walked in the garden with Adam and Eve, and he called out to Adam, or Eve or whoever it was after they had eaten the apple, and he asked, where are you guys? Come to me, and all this stuff. And why would God need to do that? Shouldn't he know exactly where they're at and at all times?
Not to mention, he physically fucking walked up to them. I mean, this implies that he has legs and can physically fucking walk.
Yeah.
This is where I have an issue. because every Christian that I've met so far will say, well, if you look into God, look at God, you will die or suffer in some way. And, and like if you see him. But not Adam and Eve. He physically fucking walked up to them and asked a bunch of questions that he should have already known the answer to. To point of fact, he should have already known what was going to happen prior to their very creation.
Exactly, and that goes back to the podcast I did. I think it was episode 9 where I talked about religion. God should know everything that a person is going to do. So why would he create that person knowing they're not evil? They're just scientific, or they need some sort of proof or reason before they worship this idol. I mean, Satan could show up and say Satan is real, and he's like, "Oh, worship me, guys, I'm God." Are we supposed to just have faith and worship Satan? I mean, shouldn't we question something? Be like, "Hey, you just told us to kill an infant. Maybe we should check this out first. Do some back research." But should we just believe everything just because we're told to? I mean, really. So why would he create that person knowing that they're not evil and send them to hell to torture them forever, essentially creating them just to torture them? Yet we're going to create this guy who's going to go out and he's going to rape children and murder people, but he's going to get saved in prison, and he gets to waltz up into heaven and just say, "Hey guys, what's going on? I'm a good guy now."
It's all part of the plan.
Yeah, that's not how it works. At least that's not how it should work. And I'm not.
And back to Moses. I mean, I just went on some random Christian forum, and I think this is funny because what I just read. And I'm just gonna read like the first two fucking comments like on this forum. I'm not gonna go into the whole thing, and they're very short. This guy says, "Hi, why are Christians scared of the sixth and seventh books of Moses, which is a Christian book?" And then this guy wrote, "The book was just named to deceive people. The contents are not related to the Bible, so Christians have nothing to do with these satanic verses or with the satanic verses of such. If you have not seen the book before, try to compare it with the Bible. You see that they are two opposite themes." Sorry, this guy has kind of a poor
grammar.
Yeah, so it's hard for me to kind of
decipher
read this fluently. But, I mean, it's just one of these things to where, like, he just called the books of Moses satanic to justify his own belief.
Yeah. So, and
it's...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying it's just annoying.
Yeah. And that just shows you what people do for their own belief. And, I mean, I'm not trying to advocate anything here. I'm trying to expose, what facts I've learned and what facts Skylar knows. And all right, well, thank you all for listening. I appreciate the interest in the subject, and hopefully we can get more views and tell other people if you want them to engage in this sort of conversation with you, or if you have any sort of information you feel like we should know, you can contact us on Facebook or Twitter or the website, jeffjarmanshow.com. This is it can be a group project. I mean, I would love to just have all the information come in, and Skylar and I will sort through it, and we will figure out what we can. So, yeah, thank you again for listening. This is the Grimm Times Podcast, and we will see you on the next episode for the second part of our religion series.